On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we have Mr. Brian Chee and Mr. Curtis Franklin on the show today. Now, we talked about organizations and their passwords in the past. They're really a thorn in the IT side, but what if we could just delete your passwords? Maybe never use them again. Well, a new campaign by a leading tech giant just might kickstart the revolution. We'll definitely talk about that. Now, as organizations continue their digital transformation, sometimes cloud storage and its cost over time is hard to predict. Well, today we have Jeremy Fitzpatrick. He's VP of Sales of Infinite, and he's going to talk about cloud storage modeling, those hidden costs, and if data protection will actually impact the equation. So sit tight because we have lots to talk about. Shouldn't miss it. It's Wyatt on the set.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 461, recorded September 17th, 2021. Are Clouds infinite? This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Nareva. Nareva is revolutionizing audio for meeting and learning spaces by making it possible to get full room microphone coverage in medium to large spaces without the cost and complexity of multi-component Pro AV solutions. That's a revolution. Learn more at nareva.com/twit. And by Akamai. Akamai is the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. To deliver and protect your digital experiences worldwide, tap into Akamai for its unrivaled intelligence, performance, and scalability. Visit akamai.com/enterprise today to learn more. And by Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat discussing tech topics big, small, and strange. Listen to Compiler on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Welcome to TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big world of the enterprise. But I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the professionals, the experts in their field, starting with our very own network and security expert and all-around tech geek, Mr. Brian Chee. He's net architect at Sky Fiber. Cheebert, how are you, my friend? What's keeping you busy?
I'm doing great. I'm actually cleaning up some installs. I just had the AT&T folks at my house, and I am now on symmetrical gig fiber and loving life, especially because we have an afternoon thunder and lightning storm, and fiber doesn't care. No more, no more utility pole amplifiers that can go out every time there's a power glitch. And yes, Ant, I am bragging. I love that I'm getting symmetrical gig, and I've waited long enough.
Leave it to a network geek to love his life because of his symmetric fiber, but that's Cheebert. Thanks, Cheebert. Well, speaking of another geek, we have also another geek in-house. He's Mr. Curtis Franklin. He's a senior analyst at Omdia, and he's a enterprise and security geek as well. Curtis, it's great to see you, my friend. What's keeping you busy?
Well, not symmetrical gig fiber, that's for sure. Hasn't made it quite down to my end of the neighborhood, but we're hopeful. No, I'm having to occupy myself with thinking about some of the new goings on in the world of security, wondering what the MITRE Defend model is going to do, and getting ready for several presentations out at the IWCE conference. That's for first responder and critical infrastructure communications. That's happening in Las Vegas at the end of the month. So heading back out to Las Vegas for me, and trying to stay happy, healthy, and productive until then.
Fantastic. Looking forward to that. Well, speaking of busy, we've had quite the busy week in the enterprise, so we definitely should get started with our content here. Now, we've discussed the subject of passwords in many, many episodes. It's definitely the thorn in IT people's side, but users just tend to make a mockery of them, right? Well, what if you could just delete your passwords? That's right. Never use them again. Well, a new campaign by a leading tech giant just might kickstart the revolution. We'll definitely talk about that. Now, as organizations continue their digital transformation, sometimes cloud storage, its cost over time can be really hard to predict. Plus, what about data protection? How will that impact the equation? Well, today we have Jeremy Fitzpatrick. He's VP of Sales at Infinite. And so sit tight because we're going to talk a lot about just how you can model it all out. But before we get to all of that goodness, let's go ahead and jump into this week's Blips. Now, we hear in the news a lot about C-suite individuals leaving tech giants to go to others. However, if you've been paying close attention, you may have noticed that Amazon AWS has had an exceptionally high attrition rate in that realm recently. Now, the ground has shifted beneath Adam Selipsky since he took over the role of AWS CEO with a highway profile of departures from the company since the announcement of Jesse's promotion. Now, some of the turnover is to be expected when the only CEO of AWS has ever known gets kicked upstairs with a big job for the entire corporation. But the quantity and quality of the people who have decided to leave is turning heads in the enterprise tech industry. Now, Charlie Bell was the biggest name to leave the company. He played an instrumental role in AWS's inception, and this week he starts a new role at Microsoft. Also this week, Ian Massingham, he joined fellow ex-AWS executives Matt Essay and Pedar Ulander at MongoDB. That's right. Job turn has been a broad trend over the last 6 months, with an incredible surge in employee turnover across the tech industry and outside of it as well. Now, so the question here is, should Selipsky be worried about the departures as a sign of a broader problem at AWS? Well, either that or a result of a backlog of job activity would have been spread over time in a long period of time for that, if not for the pandemic. Now, there's no question that AWS faces stronger competition from Microsoft and Google. In some cases, such as former AWS executive Teresa Carlson, who became chief officer at Splunk earlier this year, and Ulander, who is now MongoDB CMO, it's not hard to see why major leadership positions at fast-growing but similar tech companies would be appealing. But there are obvious signs of culture problems within AWS. I don't like to spread rumors, but if you just do a search over there at your famous search engine, you'll find some of your own examples on that. Now, what the CEO should be worried about is that one of the leadership's main job functions is to attract and retain talent. That's right. Unless culture problems, leadership, and political problems are addressed over there at AWS, might eventually see a dethroning of the cloud service giant, leaving room for the other big players.
Well, this week, Microsoft patched 4 vulnerabilities in Open Management Infrastructure, or OMI, a software agent that a lot of companies use and rather few know anything about. It's especially embedded in many commonly used Azure services. The Wiz research team discovered the issues, which include remote code execution bug and privilege escalation vulnerabilities, spread across 4 separate CVEs. Now, most large organizations using Azure are affected by these flaws, which the team has collectively dubbed OMIGOD. The open source OMI is the Unix/Linux equivalent of the Windows Management Instrumentation, WMI, and it is deployed on many, if not most, of the Unix and Linux equivalent of Windows, of these Linux virtual machines in Azure. This enables users to manage configurations across remote and local environments and collect statistics on all of them. Now, this is extensively used in many Azure services, though organizations using OMI often don't know it's there and may not know they need to go and patch it now. When an organization sets up a Linux virtual machine in the cloud and enables any of these services, OMI is silently installed on the VM and runs at the highest privilege. Now, just to make life better, there's no clear documentation in Azure on how OMI is deployed, monitored, and updated. OMI is updated through the Azure service that installed it, the researchers say, and they urge users to verify that their environment is patched and that they're running the latest version of OMI, that's 1.6.8.1. The Wiz team also warns that system-centered deployments of OMI are at higher risk because the Linux agents have been deprecated. Users may need to go out and manually update that vulnerable OMI agent.
So my story is talking about how a whole bunch of large ISPs are fighting to save those sweetheart exclusive wiring deals in a lot of large apartment buildings. Well, the cable lobby is trying to stop a possible ban on the exclusive wiring deals between internet providers and landlords, claiming that exclusive arrangements are pro-competitive, even though they make it harder for new ISPs to provide service in multi-unit apartment and condo buildings. Well, the Federal Communications Commission last week sought public comment on how to promote competition in multi-tenant environments, aka MTEs, following a presidential Biden order that encouraged the FCC to prevent ISPs from making deals with landlords that limit tenants' choices. Well, the FCC technically bans exclusive agreements for TV and telecom services in multi-unit buildings, but it hasn't stamped out the problem in part because FCC rules allow deals that prevent new ISPs from using existing wiring. Well, these wiring deals are sometimes exclusive to one ISP, even when the wires are owned by the building owner and unused. Well, darn. The new FCC public notice asked whether the commission should, quote, revisit its conclusion that exclusive wiring arrangements generally do not preclude access to new entrants and thus do not violate its rules, unquote. The conclusion was made back in 2007 under a Republican majority. The FCC is now asking for public comment on whether exclusive wiring deals, quote, inhibit entry by competing service providers, unquote, and on whether deals have any benefits for tenants to outweigh the drawbacks. So my opinion, okay, and this is my opinion, I've been in a lot of these basements and communication risers around the world. Incumbents have a very bad habit of prohibiting anyone from using their holes, aka concrete cores, between floors or conduits by plugging them up with junk, so they discourage sharing of cable paths in buildings. Sadly, this is yet another set of legislation that only seems to have input from giant ISPs and is again making it difficult for smaller organizations to provide competitive options for landlords and tenants.
Now, as we hear more about cybersecurity breaches and threats, you tend to hear less about the repercussions of them. Well, it seems that in order to slow down the obvious trend of hacks, the Department of Justice is just willing to throw the book and even the kitchen sink at individuals who are really found guilty for their crimes. Now, a man who the Department of Justice says unlocked AT&T's customers' phones for a fee was sentenced to 12 years in prison in what the judge called, quote, a terrible cybercrime over an extended period, which allegedly continued after authorities were on the scheme. Now, according to the news release from the DOJ, in 2012, Mohammed Fad, a citizen of Pakistan and Grenada, contacted an AT&T employee via Facebook and offered the employee, quote, a significant sum of money to help secretly unlock AT&T phones, freeing the customers from any installment agreement payments from the AT&T service. Fad used the alias Frank Zhang, according to the DOJ, and persuaded the AT&T employee to recruit other employees at its call center in Bothell, Washington, to help with the elaborate scheme. Now, Fad instructed the AT&T employees to set up a fake business and a phony bank account to receive payments and to create fictitious invoices for deposits into the fake accounts to create the appearance that money exchanged as part of the scheme was payment for legitimate services. Now, Fad used the alias Frank Zhang, and he, had many different other schemes that came along with it. Now, the interesting thing is a forensic analysis by AT&T showed that Fad had his helpers fraudulently unlocked more than 1.9 million phones, costing the company more than $200 million. Now, it seems it may only be a matter of time that the DOJ releases whether anyone besides AT&T was harmed as a result of the scheme and if customer data was also accessed. Now, my guess is this isn't the last we've heard with the famous Frank Zhang. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the Bytes. But before we get to the Bytes, we do have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Nareva. Now, there are plenty of simple plug-and-play audio solutions for huddle rooms and conference rooms, but you probably have experienced this on calls. Getting full room mic coverage in mid-sized or large meeting and learning spaces has traditionally meant making a big leap into complexity and high costs of Pro AV solutions. But Nareva is changing all that by simplifying almost every aspect of audio conferencing. Now let's compare the two approaches to getting quality audio in larger spaces. Now let's talk about purchase and installation. Now for pro AV systems, for mid-sized to large rooms, installations involve multiple components, including mics and speakers installed in the ceiling or spread across the table. And there's lots of cables, tons of cables. Plus it requires specialized technicians to determine the required components, install and calibrate the system, and it takes days for installation. Plus it can cost tens of thousands of dollars per room for purchase and installation. Now, think about Nareva Audio. It provides exceptional audio for a room up to 25 by 25 feet with one integrated microphone and speaker bar, plus two bars cover a space up to 30 by 50 feet. And installs are simple. They're just DIY projects. That's right. It takes about 30 minutes to install each device on the wall with just 2 screws and 1 cable. Plus, the costs a fraction of those pro AV solutions. Now let's talk about mic coverage. Now in pro AV systems, typically they use beamforming mic systems that provide good pickup within the beams, but they can be diminished, and that diminished pickup if a talker moves outside or faces away from those beams. Now it needs to be recalibrated if you rearrange those rooms as well. With Nareva's microphone mist technology, you get true full room coverage, so everyone is heard, so no matter where they are, where they move in the room, and which way they face. And there's continuous auto calibration, which means your room is always ready for your meetings. Now, let's talk about management software. Now, pro AV systems, they have really complicated systems. That's right. Plus, training may be required for IT pros just to operate the software. Nareva Console is a simple, intuitive platform that lets you easily monitor, manage, and adjust and scale your fleet of systems from anywhere. No training required. The question is, which approach will you choose? Learn more at nareva.com/twit. That's NUREVA.com/twit. And we thank Nareva for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for the Bytes. And this one's an interesting one because we've talked about passwordless worlds in the past, but things are not moving forward that quickly. Maybe this just will. Cheebert?
Okay, so let's go back a little bit. We've all started hearing about, different systems to try and make our logins more secure. So that whole bit where you log in, you give it a password, and then it sends you back a, say, 6-digit code to your phone, and then you go from that. Well, there's a problem with that. That password's still there. And what people can do is, the bad guys can go and try that password to see if you've reused it on other sites. So that's a problem. Now, what's happening with the story, this is an Ars Technica story, and thank you very much to them, is they're talking about Microsoft. Now, this is available or has been available in Windows 10 and some of the new Microsoft accounts. And the idea is, instead of using a password and then a counter password, let's call it that, they're now saying, we're going to use the authenticator system, and it's like it's rolling a brand new password each and every time you use it. Kind of cool. Now, I'm going to call on Lou only because he's been the guinea pig for this at Microsoft for God knows how long. I've seen various versions of it all over the place. I saw the Microsoft folks using smart cards, those little chip cards, and you have to stick it in to a reader in order to log in. And then that spawned a whole bunch of, keyboards from Cherry that had the special slots. HP had them also. And then now, laptops started having those slots, but it's getting better. And so Lou has direct experience with the Microsoft Authenticator app. I use Duo. There are many, many out there. And so Lou, what's the state of the art now? What's Microsoft having you use? And do you still have passwords, or can we truly go passwordless now?
So without giving up too much here, think about that. I don't want to give up too much secrets of security, right, to a big tech giant. But what I will say, I'll give a theoretical solution here, because I do work with a lot of organizations who are implementing this specifically. And what I can tell you is it is possible to almost go completely passwordless. In fact, I think it is possible. In fact, I've known organizations that have not typed in their password since they started using this mechanism. The authenticator, think about this. You connect from a remote location to a remote jump box. You can do that by using the authenticator, showing your presence and also showing your identity by using biometrics of some kind, whether it's a fingerprint or your face. Authenticating you, and then also they give you a test in there. They ask you a question of some kind that you are displayed on the screen, and you have to answer on the authenticator, so you have multi-factor going on inside there. Then once you're in the jump box, you also don't have to log in, because again, you get that same kind of federation capability as well as using the authenticator. And so you're able to have a zero trust environment, but also you never ever have to enter a password, and you're using hardware that is readily available that's made to be secure, whether it's your iOS device or it's another device of some kind that handles the authentication. So it does remove those walls that require passwords. And so, sometimes, that will make it so that it's easier for authentication to go around multiple times. Like, for instance, if I'm using let's say a SharePoint site that has some data on there that's very secure, they can enforce another authentication cycle with your device because it's that easy. People don't have to type anything, and they can guarantee that it's the user. And so it's a pretty interesting model, and I've seen it be very successful. And if you add additional factors into it, like for instance, identifying presence is another one. You could also use other devices like YubiKeys and other things that also help with that. And then you enforce it using secure VMs, and you add more and more layers into the system, and you have a very secure and zero trust environment. So I think this could be the start of a new revolution. And I've seen it, like I said, I've seen it in organizations I work with implement this successfully.
Yeah, I've actually seen it too. It's pretty obvious. I've done a pretty decent amount of work with the U.S. military and other countries' militaries. And obviously you want to protect the crown jewels. So one of the things that we used to have, or in one iteration, is I'd go and stick in my smart card and then give it a something. So it's something you have and something you know. Pretty cool stuff. It's something that needs to happen. Now, I'm going to change gears a little bit and ask this of Curt. Curt, you've been talking to various folks in your role as a analyst. Do you think we're going to get pushback? Is the world ready for this, for something that's more sophisticated? Is the world ready to get rid of passwords?
Well, you're sort of asking two questions there, and I do want to break it down. Is the world ready to get rid of passwords? I think much of the world would love to be rid of passwords. Passwords are the classic example of a two-edged sword. On the one hand, they do provide a legitimate factor in authentication, something you know. On the other hand, they are the most easily guessed and most frequently exploited factor of authentication. So their security is suspect at best. The next question is the one that's really important, and that is, are we ready to replace them? And while I think that the factor that Microsoft has gone to is a major step, a legitimate question can be asked about how much security is improved if we replace one factor with another. Let's not forget that if you use something like Microsoft Authenticator or Okta or even something like a YubiKey and don't use a password, you still don't have two-factor authentication. You've simply replaced one factor with another. Now, there are some of these that have been shown to be theoretically vulnerable. Others, there's a question about things like recovery of accounts if there is a lost factor. So I think that this is a solid step in the right direction, and I believe we will ultimately move toward passwordless. But for the time being, I think more companies are going to use things like Microsoft Authenticator as an additional factor rather than a replacement factor for passwords.
You know, this is one of those topics that is going to go on and on and on and on. You know, and it's going to start, I think, become even more important as we start getting more and more into a cashless society. You know, people are starting to use, like, for instance, Apple Cash on their phones a lot more. I was right behind a gentleman that used his iPhone to pop up his credit card to pay at the Target as I was doing my checkout. But here's the issue that I'm having. He was busy juggling things around and pulling his mask down so that he could do Face ID. And is this something that we might actually see? You know, okay, I have some older friends. Face ID and Touch ID absolutely baffles them. But yet those are some of the least egregious ways of getting biometrics going. You know, there's a lot of folks that are talking about, gee, we have fingerprint ID or Face ID on both the Android and the i platforms. Is it time for us to move forward? So I'm going to throw this back at Lou just because and says, what's your experience? Is Microsoft ready to have both a smart card or something like that, along with biometrics stored in something like Active Directory? Is the platform ready? And mostly, is it ready to cross platforms? Is the federation piece there yet?
So let's unpack that for a second. Are they ready to store additional pieces of encrypted data that identifies the user? I would say yes, they do have that capability. The key here is, you know, there's lots of other mechanisms. Obviously, there's Windows Hello, there's other versions of biometrics here, but again, they're very similar. Now, you go back to, we talked about a couple of weeks ago about driver's licenses being stored on Apple phones because there's a new secure digital enclave that's on them, and how the TSA is going to start doing that. Could that be a thing where now your device is also a smart card? And I think a lot of these systems, like Curt was saying, you know, both Microsoft as well as Okta and other identity providers and identity systems and services have the capability to institute additional factors that have additional pieces of authentication within them. And I think that's what's so great about these systems is organizations can customize it in whatever way they want. If they want to pay the money for additional secure factors, they can do that. Now the authenticator mechanism, it's, you know, Microsoft Authenticator is free. It's similar with a lot of these other ones that are out there. I know LastPass has one, like you said, Duo has one. Now the systems that utilize them, sometimes they're not free, but again, same sense, they do offer customization per organization and policy per organization. So, you know, is there a capability to scale this out? I definitely say there is. Is there room for newer technology to reduce that barrier of having to use things like face and fingerprint? I think so. You know, but again, the same sense, if you think about it, if you had it on your phone, you'd still have to tell the phone, provide presence of you being with your phone in order to release the token of some kind to the third party system for that factor. And so, you know, there has to be some way of releasing that, whether it again be a fingerprint, a photo, a voice, an audio clip, you know, something, in order to do that. So yeah, I think there's still kind of a ways to go to make this a little simpler, but in the same sense, I think it's getting there.
Yeah, and I have had the dream of being able to have my front door welcome me saying, "Hello, Mr. Chee," and open up for me. We're not there yet. And I'm not sure I trust it yet. But I think this might be a pretty good way of moving in that direction. Make the world do something that's more secure than passwords. Let's get beyond passwords, I think, is the bottom line. And you know what?
Yep.
This is going to be a topic we're going to be talking about for years on end. But we need to go pay some bills. So why don't we go and see about doing an ad and, see who's sponsoring This Week in Enterprise Tech today.
Thank you, Chubert. That's right. We do have another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Akamai. Now, when you're in software and services like I am, you think about scale, and you always think about Akamai. That's right. Now, I've been using Akamai for many, many years, especially utilizing their unparalleled CDN support, especially to have large files with low latency. But we talked a lot about microservices on this show and how it's the choice for a lot of organizations. Imagine not having to think about scale for those services. Well, edge computing brings your software and services as close proximity to your end users as possible. And that's where Akamai is the platinum standard. That's where Akamai is the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. And you should definitely check it out. Now, ask yourself something. Would you like to deliver extraordinary customer experiences and run code at the edge? Well, Akamai is your answer, and it's truly, truly powerful. Think about this, because Akamai is 10 times the locations of the nearest competitor. That's over 4,000 locations. You are always closer to your end user with Akamai, significantly cutting down on that latency that you're always worried about. Now, Akamai will also greatly improve your customer experience as well. That's right. Your customers will get the content, apps, sites, and video they need without lag, interruption, or latency during their unexpected traffic spikes. Now, prepare for spikes in demand and optimize resources to provide the best experience for your customers. Now, you'll be amazed at Akamai's unparalleled performance, and you'll always be one network hop away from 85% of the world's internet users. Now, what about scalability? Well, that's not a problem, because application architects get the flexibility to scale their entire enterprise applications with Akamai Edge Workers. That's right. With Edge Workers, your development teams can focus on building while letting Akamai take care of the challenges of scaling globally. And because Akamai empowers you to deploy serverless code at the edge, you won't experience the headaches of increased traffic at origin or the overheads that go along with it. Now, Akamai gives you the power to innovate right at the edge, because your logic and functions are deployed and active at the nearest proximity to your end users, and you're getting the fastest end user experience around the globe. Now, Akamai makes it simple to build right at the edge using JavaScript, so you can innovate in real time. And you get low latency access to data for custom code at the edge. And Akamai can optimize your API traffic delivery for edge applications. Now, the question is, what's the cost? Well, even with its unrivaled intelligence, performance, and scalability, Akamai is comparatively priced. That's right, because limits are set per request, and you can be sure your workload will scale no matter the size of your user base. And being serverless means you'll see decreased overhead at origin too. Now, you know Akamai and their reputation. I definitely do. They're trusted by the biggest brands in the world, and you're getting 10 times the locations of your competitors for the fastest customer experience available. So definitely check out Akamai website to learn more about edge computing. You can even have a great conversation with them, and you might be surprised just how competitive the pricing is. Build closer to your end user with Akamai, the world's largest distributed edge compute platform. Visit akamai.com/enterprise today to learn more. That's akamai.com/enterprise. And we thank Akamai for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for my favorite part of the show, where we get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Riot. Today we have Jeremy Fitzpatrick. He's the VP of Sales of Infinite. Welcome to the show, Jeremy.
Great. Thanks to be here.
So thanks for being here. Now, before we get into the meat of it, because obviously we know cloud storage is a pretty huge topic to get into, our audience loves to hear people's origin stories. Can you maybe take us through a short journey through tech and what brought you to Infinite?
Certainly. Yeah. So I started my career back at a company called Ricoh. We were in the office equipment industry. And at that time, everybody in that industry was looking for new revenue streams, and IT services was one of the ones that I clung on to and started to move into. Actually, I led the team that sold the first VMware virtualization project some 18 some years ago. So that was what got me interested. And then from there, I was tapped to go and work at a data center that we were transforming into an IT services company. So we wanted to take that asset of the data center and really use that as the foundation to move into the technology services and cloud services and a gateway to everything in IT. Sat in that chair for about 5 years. And as I sat in that same desk, same seat, my business card changed 4 times through acquisitions. Kind of a glutton for punishment. I've been through about 9 acquisitions in my career as a whole. And from there, once the last acquisition happened, I decided to move over to Infinite. And Infinite offered the opportunity to kind of continue where I left off, and had a wealth of assets to help really solve problems in enterprise IT.
Fantastic. So, cloud storage is a big topic. Obviously it's a challenge to model things out because sometimes there's a lot of hidden costs. It's really tough, especially for organizations that are digitally transforming, but also organizations that are trying to scale. Now, I actually worked with several organizations, and when they uploaded their data to the cloud, they had to deal with compliance locations and availability, and making their apps make lots of requests to the back end. In fact, some of them actually went bankrupt. It's no joke. Are you seeing this theme in the industry? What's happening here?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing, when companies decide to make a move to the cloud, the last thing they're thinking about is the economics. They're looking at the security, like you said, they're looking at the fit. And the challenge is a lot of these companies don't really understand how their apps are being utilized by their end users. And if you don't understand the utilization, then it's really tough to find the right workload optimized target for your data, for your storage. It's interesting because really the economics are driven by what the big cloud providers are facing is, how do I gain access to so many different endpoints that people are trying to pull the data out of, as well as the top of rack and the filers and all those things that are moving. So their economic model has to shift as they offer that to clients who are using it for different workloads.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting model that happens. Like a lot of organizations, they have a data store where they query the data and they pull data down, but then they want to do other things with data. They want to do analytics. They want to run it through models, and so they put it in a data lake or somewhere else. And now they're paying even more money, and so on and so forth. What are organizations doing to try to figure out, to be able to model out those costs, to understand what their budget's going to be, and to make things right for themselves?
Well, that's a challenge. Sometimes there's not a good way to see what that tool is going to cost you until you're actually there. And that's what's really creating kind of some repatriation, right? We have folks that are dipping into these types of solutions and tools, and there's some vendor lock in there, and it costs a lot to reverse that decision. So it's hard to go in completely eyes wide open and model it out, 100%. But there's enough use cases out there that are defined, and really kind of taking that granular look to saying, okay, how much do I access this application? Who's accessing it? Where are they at? And can we streamline it? If you have a centralized population that are accessing it, obviously you can use different ways to connect to these cloud providers and be able to move data in and out at a much lower cost, but they have to be a kind of a centralized user base. So there's lots of different types of things that have to go into the considerations, and no company knows it all on their own. So sometimes going out and seeking help and finding some people who've already crossed that bridge really helps to make sure you're going the right direction.
So you talked a little bit about them. What are some foundational, let's say an organization's ready to, release a piece of software and they have a data storage. What types of things foundationally should they be thinking about here? What should they start with to try to ensure that they understand their monthly costs going forward?
Well, if they know how the data is being accessed currently and what types of, I've sat down with hundreds of companies, and very rarely do I find a company that says, yes, this is actually what this data set and how it's being used today. It was a healthcare company, and I asked them, there's an EMR system. They were looking at moving it up to Azure. And the first thing we said is, okay, so you have a Citrix environment. What is the data throughput going back and forth between these environments? And They actually knew. They said 97 megs. I was shocked. They never really get that answer. Really quickly calculate that, and you can see that, okay, just the data egress traffic is going to cost you about $2,700 a month just through, moving that data back and forth.
So there are a bunch of factors here, though, right? I think that, like you talked about just how you're accessing the data, but there are sometimes requirements that are outside of that. Like, for instance, how what the performance you want for that data access, or how reliable you want that to be, whether it's in multiple different regions, so that availability of the data. Does this become part of that equation as you kind of cost out this and model this out?
Yeah, definitely from a availability standpoint, how many different data sets you need. One of the things that I find a lot of companies aren't doing that really is the kind of fundamental challenge is not treating all data equally, right? If you're a healthcare company and you have patient records, don't treat that data the same as you treat the inventory of cotton swabs. Understand, as we said earlier, what is the crown jewels of the data, and make sure that you're putting the right investment into that data set, and understanding that you don't need the same protections, the same requirements, the same retention policies for all data sets.
Right. And now there are some hidden costs here, right? What are some of the hidden costs that organizations don't think about? They try to think about some of the things and model them out, but there are sometimes things they just forget. What are some of those hidden things they need to think about more?
Yeah, so early on, we were a managed service provider. When we first kicked it off, AWS managed service provider practice, we had some customers that we sat with, and they wanted to move their e-commerce site up to AWS. And we said, okay, well, we'll work with you on that. We built out the design, we vetted it, we got it all up there. It was running great. About halfway through the first month, the storage and IOPS just shut down. And we found out that at that point in time that there was additional, billing requirements, and you got to feed the machine and add more coins to keep the IOPS going to meet the certain levels that you want. Or you have to move that to a new service, a new platform that will do what the workload dictates it needs to do. So there's everything from, the puts and gets, and every time you push data in and out, every time you access it, there's the IOPS and some of the more traditional block storage. So there's a plethora of different metered services that you have to be eyes wide open aware of.
Now, you brought up that good point. The kind of the ingress and egress of data. API requests is another one that we've talked about in the past around things that are kind of hiding costs. Are you helping, or are you seeing help for organizations out there to help model that out, or help them architect their system in a specific way where that's more predictable?
Yeah, we've developed, we have our own cloud storage here in more of a traditional sense, where we use, traditional network metrics. And we've actually put a term called freegress, where instead of charging for egress, we've built it into the cost of the bucket, give you a solid one price per gig cost, and you can access it as much as you want. You can move it as much as you want. And that you don't have that Hotel California effect where you can always come, but you can never leave without a large credit card transaction.
Right, I love that. Now, another thing that we see a lot, obviously organizations, once they start to figure this out a little bit, you got to tack on security on there. So, making sure that data is compliant, it's secure in a specific way. And sometimes that can also add additional costs. What are organizations doing here to help them model that out and understand what they need?
I've seen a lot of organizations who are using public cloud as just an extension of their own traditional in-house environment, where they're using, let's call it AWS, and using a direct connect to access resources up there. However, they're locking down the virtual private cloud environment so that nothing leaves through AWS. It all comes back through their AWS direct connect and then out their traditional tools that they use in the data center. So they're able to maintain the tools that they have expertise in and are used to, and just are using the AWS as an extension of their data center.
So one of the big interesting things that we are seeing is, you talked a little bit about this, is a lot of organizations are using kind of a hybrid cloud. They're utilizing more than one cloud provider for data storage. And of course, those cloud providers might provide different ways for modeling data storage and all of these other compute calculations that need to happen. Is there a way to consolidate all of that? Is there a mechanism for them to better understand this and understand what their budget needs to be in the near future, but even though they have these multi-cloud solutions?
Yeah, you definitely see these multi-cloud solutions being more and more adopted by enterprise. We have a financial institution that actually has their ATM system that's tied up and hosted out of Azure, and then they have a new front end that they just put up in AWS. So every time they're passing traffic back and forth, they're needing to communicate through both clouds and have a front end and back end communicate there. There's lots of different network solutions out there now that allow you to kind of create that mesh between private clouds that allow you to pass traffic with a more secure and a much more better financial cost of ownership than just doing it through public internet. And as long as you can control and proxy out where your end users are connecting, it allows you to be very creative in how you deploy that.
Makes sense. Now, you talked a little bit about this. You guys obviously have an in-house cloud storage solution. What kind of features does it have, especially from a modeling perspective, that's kind of unique to what some of the other providers have?
Yeah, so Object Store as a whole has really taken shape with some new use cases, and as the data explosion is happening, Object Store is becoming much more relevant and finding new ways to utilize it and harness the power of it. What we've found is, especially early on in the pandemic, with the distributed workforce and everybody working from home, you lost the power of the LAN, right? Where you have, let's call it architects and engineers or healthcare providers trying to pass large files across the LAN was easy. Now, when they're working from home and trying to access and look at a PAX image, or you're looking at a CAD drawing, pulling that into an underpowered home network takes forever. So we partnered up with a company called LucidLink, and they offer a really smart front end for us, where we're now able to take that same object, that file, and stream it, use streaming technology to allow someone working from home in an underpowered network to be able to review it, edit it, and really not have to ever download it. So you're not sitting around waiting for download. You can access the file in real time, scan to whatever area of the file you need to utilize, and then you make your changes and it goes right back in centralized environment. In addition to that, what we're really seeing, we touched on a little bit earlier, the security side of things, ransomware. Everybody's got a conversation around ransomware right now. One of the things that we're seeing Object Store used for is being able to create a low-cost second data set that is able to be used as an immutable target that separates it from your production network, separates it from your primary data set, and really focuses on the ability to recover that data once all other security functions are breached.
Fantastic. Well, you have a lot more to talk about here, because obviously cloud storage is a big topic. But before we get to that, we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Compiler, original podcast from Red Hat discussing tech topics big, small, and strange. Compiler comes to you from the makers of Command Line Heroes, another of our sponsors, and is hosted by Angela Andrews and Brent Simoneau. Now, technology can be big, bold, bizarre, and sometimes complicated. And Compiler unravels industry topics, trends, and things you've always wanted to know about tech through interviews with the people who know it best. Now, on their show, you will hear a chorus of perspectives from the diverse communities behind the code. Now, Compiler brings together a curious team of Red Hatters to tackle big questions in tech, like what is technical debt? What are tech hiring managers actually looking for? And do you have to know how to code to get started in open source? Well, the first episode covers a topic of much debate in the tech world. Should managers code? Interesting one. Now, jumping into the fix the problem can be very seductive. And in this episode of Compiler, you're hearing from a manager who has learned that supporting his team to fix the problem rather than doing it himself might be slower, but it can lead to better results. Now, a managerial position is seen as a milestone of working life. Suddenly, a person who worked on code begins to step back from those day-to-day tasks. What does it mean? What started as an internal email at Red Hat blossomed to a much deeper discussion about career growth and what can get caught in its wake. Now, have you walked into an interview and been asked to work through a coding problem on a whiteboard? Now, if you were hired, how much time do you actually spend in front of a whiteboard and on a job? And how do you interview for a technical position? Red Hatters cast a skeptical eye toward the dreaded whiteboard interview, but discover they can have real life benefits. Now, I checked out the first episode, Should Managers Code, and I found it really enlightening, actually. Having managed large software development engineering organizations, I have a specific mindset. Well, listening to this episode really helped me see the different perspectives, and it was really, really interesting. So definitely check it out. Episodes are now out. Go and download them at any time. Be sure to check back for new shows. Listen to Compiler on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to your podcast. We'll also include a link on this episode's show page. My thanks to Compiler for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, we've been talking with Jeremy Fitzpatrick. He's the VP of Sales at Infinite about cloud storage and about modeling costs for cloud storage. But I do want to bring in my co-host here because of course, they have a lot of questions as usual. I want to start with Curtis. Curtis?
Thanks, Lou. I appreciate it. Jeremy, one of the things that a lot of companies have given attention to is data protection, especially from the problems that can exist through misconfigured storage. You know, we have the infamous misconfigured S3 bucket issues that left hundreds of thousands of records from multiple customers unprotected. You know, what do you find that you have to do to make it easier for customers to get it right? Or is that something where the customers just have to lean on their own ability to configure things properly in order to be secure?
Well, that's an interesting question because you find that sometimes the rate of innovation that happens in some of these public cloud entities can be a detriment, right? Because if you're not a company that's writing your own code and fully dedicated to keeping up with the bleeding edge of technology, you're likely to miss something, and you're likely to not have the right expertise to leverage the right tool. So a couple of ways to handle that is you work with a provider that does specialize in that and can make sure and take that off your plate, and they have their own team that is constantly looking at what's changing, how it's changing, and why it's changing. Or you can design in a different method for access and really kind of segment out that microsegmentation concept of making sure that data it can't be accessed from the outside, which does take some configuration expertise, but you can do it at a different level.
Okay. Well, when you're working on that with your customers, do you find that they are eager to bring in the expertise? Or again, is this something that you find you need to do some hand-holding with, sometimes to perhaps help introduce them to the partners that can help protect their data?
Yeah, definitely a combination of both. Sometimes you got to protect the customer from themselves and make sure that they understand all the pitfalls that can happen if they're moving forward. But a lot of times it comes back to what's the use case. If the customers are looking for, we have a lot of customers who are using S3 and Blob, and they're pushing an archive into kind of a set it and forget it mode, just trying to check a compliance box to make sure they have that full data set that's offsite. And it's a lot less complicated when you're looking at that type of use case than if you're looking at something that's going to have access from the outside world and be able to distribute content and files and data to end users that are distributed.
Chee?
Well, I want us to rewind just a little bit. I want to go and address some issues that people keep asking. What are the hidden costs of cloud storage? And going a little bit further, some people, old timers like me, are saying, well, why don't I just do a CapEx investment so it's local and then not worry about the Chihuahua versus the Rottweiler OpEx bloom of my costs?
Sure. So there's lots of different points along that spectrum. You have the full, traditional model where you want in-house CapEx equipment. You're going to lock it down within your own four walls or within a co-located data center, control the access to it, and have a very, very defined cost there. Then you have on the other side of that spectrum, the full-on cloud native storage, where you are going to have the taxi meter running at all times and hitting these different types of puts and gets and egress and IOPS that are going to create a much more unpredictable model. In the middle, we have kind of what Infinite specializes in, is where we take that traditional type infrastructure model and we hand it off with more of a public cloud economic model. And so it's a predictable cost, but it does take the headaches of managing the infrastructure, managing a data center, managing the network, having all the platform type of duties in-house, and pushes them off to a provider as well. And we're not the only ones who do that, but that there is, along that spectrum, lots of different solutions depending on your needs.
Well, why don't we do this then? We've got viewers out there all over the world. They want to know, what kinds of things should they be doing to prep to be able to talk to you folks? You know, you did one example, the Citrix user that knew what kind of bandwidth they're using for their Citrix application. But what else? What kinds of inventory? What kinds of introspection should a person do to prepare to have a conversation with you?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of times the conversation starts that checklist. And then from that conversation with a consultant like Infinite, they can go back and start to gather that data, and with the partner at the side to make sure it's comprehensive. That's the utilization and transformation model there. If they're looking at just controlling from a data protection and a data management side internally, that's where I always see the IT people are speaking one language and the business people are speaking another. The IT people don't technically understand a lot of times the value of the data or the use case for how people are accessing the data. And by the same token, the business people don't understand the technology that is allowing people to access and running the application. So there's really kind of that, men are from Venus, women are from Mars type conversation that has to happen there, where you get those internal people on the same page. And sometimes that takes some outside help to come in and have these conversations and translate from ones and zeros to dollar signs. But at the other side of the coin, it's really just getting a more holistic understanding. So I'll give you one example real quick. So if we got a compliance officer at a healthcare organization that just takes the highest bar of 10 years of requirement for retention and applies that across the whole thing, they don't understand the financial ramifications that they're asking the IT department to provide that service, that solution. So if they're able to be at the table and understand, okay, wait, if we just take this 10% of our data and apply that and look at the interpretation of that compliance, that's going to be, XYZ in dollar savings, especially as our data set grows. So really having those conversations and making sure that the economics and the tech are being communicated to each other is a really good starting point.
Fabulous. Well, one last fast question. When someone asks, well, what happens if the West Coast goes dark? Do you have redundancy built into your cloud?
Yes, we do. Yeah, we have points across the map and across the globe that we can deploy services on. And really the way we look at things in Infinite is understanding the value of the workload and what the actual business requirements are, and then designing the right level of redundancy. So you might have, a ERP system that is running 3 shifts for a manufacturing plant that has to be up. We're going to look at that, and we're going to be able to put multiple locations and have an active, never go down type of deployment mentality there. Otherwise, on the other side of the coin, you have maybe an HR system that is a legacy records retention type of system that doesn't quite need that level of investment. So looking at it and really making sure we're balancing the dollars and the data and the investment is a big priority for us.
Well, thank you so very much. I want to go and set the Wayback Machine and say, well, we're all going to miss Sir Clive Sinclair, who did an awful lot for the microcomputer industry. I had a Timex Sinclair that I made do all kinds of things, and I'm very sad to hear that he has passed from this world. But anyway, so we've talked about Sir Clive and some of the really, really early stuff, and now we're talking to Infinite. And we're having all kinds of fun talking about the cloud growing up. Anyway, Mr. Lou, I think we need to say goodbye don't you?
Indeed, indeed. Well, that's right. All things must come to an end. Jeremy, thank you so much for being here. We're running a little low on time, but we do want to give you a chance to tell the folks at home a little bit more about Infinite. Where can they go to get started? Where can organizations find more information?
Certainly. At our website, infinite.com, we have everything that we do and we specialize in, and we can get you connected to the right subject matter expert for what you're looking for.
Fantastic. Well, folks, you've done it again. You've sat through another hour of the best dang enterprise podcast in the universe. So definitely tune your podcatcher to TWiT. I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to my co-host. That's right. Starting with our very own Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, what's going on for you in the coming weeks, and where can people find you?
Well, I'm going to be calling our friends at AT&T. I'm supposed to be having a gig fiber that goes all the way back to the central office. But we've had to do all kinds of pauses because I'm getting internet dropouts like crazy, and it's not even raining. So AT&T, expect a call from me on this one. But anyway, if you want to hear from me or you want to go and make yourself heard, yes, Ant, I was bragging. Now I'm eating humble pie. I'd love to hear from you. On Twitter, I'm ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab. But I'm also Cheebert, spelled CHEEBERT at twit.tv. You can also hit all the hosts at TWiT at twit.tv. Now, I do ask, especially for our PR folks out there, send the emails to me. Don't clog up Mr. Lou's poor email account. He's got a lot to deal with. I'm the producer. I'll go and book the shows and help keep Mr. Lou sane, if possible. You know, hey.
Thank you, Julie.
Anyway, and yes, Burke, I will stop chewing on the fiber if we can get it more reliable. Anyway, thanks for listening and love to hear your show ideas.
Thank you, Cheebert. Well, we also have to thank our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, what's going on for you in the coming weeks? Where can people find you and all your great work?
Well, I am doing some research on awareness training, looking at all of the training to help employees be aware of all of the cybersecurity nasties out in the world. Also going to be beginning to look at some risk measurement and monitoring systems. In the meantime, I'm getting ready to go out and talk about things like smart cities, critical infrastructure, and how they all can be secured. It's just a lot of interesting things to talk about, and I would love to hear from the members of the TWiT Riot. If you've got security concerns, security questions, or anything you'd like to get off your chest to know more about, feel free to hit me up in a direct message on Twitter. I'm at KG4GWA, or send email to twit@twit.com. State me in the subject matter, and I will get back to you as quickly as I can. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Curtis. Well, folks, we also have to thank you as well. You're the person who drops in each and every week to watch and to listen to our show, to get your enterprise goodness. We want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on your enterprise news. So go to our show page right now, twit.tv/TWiT. There we have all the amazing back episodes, the show notes, the co-host information, and the stories we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos there, you'll get your helpful subscribe and download links. Support the show by getting your audio version and your video version of your choice. Listen on any one of your devices or on any one of your podcast applications, because we're on all of them, and it's really the best way to stay on top of your news as well as support the show. So definitely subscribe. Plus, you may have heard we talk about it a lot, and it's a really great thing. That's right, Club TWiT. That's right. It's a members-only ad-free podcast service with a bonus TWiT Plus feed that you can't get anywhere else, and it's only $7 per month. Now, one of my favorite things that comes along with that Club TWiT is the exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. We have a lot of great conversations on there, a lot of fun topics, and they're the masters of animated GIFs on there. So definitely check that out. I really love it. Join Club TWiT and be part of the movement. Go to twit.tv/Club Club TWiT. Now, Club TWiT now offers corporate group plans as well. That's right. It's a great way to give your team access to our ad-free tech podcast. The plans start with 5 members at a discounted rate of $6 each month per month, and you can add as many seats as you'd like. So it's really a great way for your IT department, developers, your tech teams to stay on top of the latest and greatest tech topics in our podcast. And just like regular memberships, they can join the TWiT Discord channel as well and get the TWiT Plus bonus feed. Sign up at the link of twit.tv/Club TWiT. Now, after you subscribe, you can impress your family members, your friends, your coworkers with the gift of TWiT, because we talk about a lot of fun things on this show, and I guarantee they will find it fun and interesting as well. So definitely share it with them and get them subscribed as well. Now, after you subscribe, and if you're available, on 1:30 p.m. Pacific time on Fridays, we do this show live. That's right. twit.tv/live. That's right. Come see how behind the scenes. Come see how the pizza's made. Come see how the show is run, all the banter we do before and after the show. Definitely check out the live feed and be part of that fun thing. Now, if you're going to watch the show live, we also have our infamous IRC channel as well. There's a lot of great characters in there, and I just love saying some of their names. Like, for instance, Chickenhead21 is always in there supporting us. Keith 512. Of course, we have everyone in there. Doug M, PC Guy. Everyone's really highly supportive, and they do lots of fun topics during the show. So definitely join them, irc.twit.tv. Now, I want you to definitely hit me up on Twitter, because I like having conversations with people like you, audience members, talking about show topics. Don't feel bad about hitting me up on Twitter. Now, my email's another story, but Twitter's not. So definitely hit me up on there, twitter.com/LeoMem. I post all my enterprise tidbits. I take DMs about show topics and ideas. I sometimes put a little bit of banter on there as well, and I have great conversations with you. So definitely check that out. But if you want to know what I do normally at my work week at Microsoft, you can definitely check that out. Developers.microsoft.com/office. There we post the latest and greatest ways for you to customize your office solutions to make it more productive for you. Now, I want to thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support This Week in Enterprise Tech each and every week, and we couldn't do this show without them. So thank you for all their support over the years. And I also want to thank all the engineers and staff at TWiT. They work tirelessly to make this network amazing, and we really couldn't do TWiT without them. So thank you for all your support. I want to thank Mr. Brian Chee one more time. He's not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer. Like he said, he does all the show bookings and all the plannings for the show, and we really couldn't do it without him. So thank you, Cheebert, for all your support. We really appreciate it. Now, before we sign out, we do have to thank our editor, Mr. Victor B. He makes us look good afterwards, because you know what? We make lots of mistakes, and he makes it look like we don't. So thank you, Victor. Plus our TD for today, Mr. Ant Pruitt. He's a very talented guy. He does a lot of amazing things, and one of those is hands-on photography. Great show here on TWiT. And what's going on hands-on photography this week?
Well, this week, Mr. Lou, we did a slight pivot, and I wanted to talk a little bit about video. And of course, there's the world of Premiere Pro, but then there's also stuff like DaVinci Resolve. And I think we're going to do some more video content for the hands-on photography crowd, because, hey, 24 frames per second is 24 pictures in a second, right?
That's right. That's right. I actually learned, I don't know if it was, I definitely saw a video from you a while back where you did one on blurring things in there, like blurring faces and other things. That was a great one. I learned a lot from that. And in fact, I just used it yesterday. So if you could do one on that, that would be amazing.
I got your back.
All right. All right. Well, thanks a lot. And until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep TWiT.
Hey, you don't have to wait till the weekend to get the tech news you need. Join Jason Howell and myself, Micah Sargent, for Tech News Weekly, where we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news.